wanted to do our first full logo design, spending time on focusing on the full process. This section will follow the development of a logo for a new local coffee spot called the Coffee Guild. We walk through all the details of the logo design process, including the brainstorming and concept development stage, and finally getting this logo in a final scalable and flexible vector asset. The first stage in the logo development process is reading or getting the right information from the client or client brief. Some clients supply with a client brief, which will detail and outline their target audience, mission statement, and overall desired look and feeling of the brand based on research or data. Not all clients supply a nicely put together client brief. Some clients are smaller and will be coming to you for guidance for what is first in the process. I put together an awesome downloadable resource for you guys called the Logo Design Client Questionnaire. Feel free to send this document to clients after you customize it with your company name and logo to be able to capture the right questions and answer you'll need to start that brainstorming process. And also feel free to modify questions as you wish. Some of these questions are vital to ask a client who does not seem to know where to get started with sharing their thoughts and ideas about his company or logo. These types of questions are direct and intended to give you a basic starting point for the design process. Without knowing what we need to know about the company, creating a logo will lose a sense of authenticity, and the design will be based on just looks and not foundational ideas and company goals. Let's review some of these questions. So what's your company mission statement? So as you know, a mission statement is kind of that 1 or 2 line description of a company that describes what they do. It usually gives you a hint at what industry they're in and what target market they're trying to target. And the second question would be a little bit more follow-up on that target audience. If they're a brand new company, they're coming to you for a logo for the very first time, you want them to also figure out who do they want to target, who do they think their product service is for. And this is huge when it comes to the logo design process, because it can set the tone and style for the particular brand because of the target audience. So if you have millennials, it might be a little bit more fun and bright and vibrant. If it's targeting retirees, it might be more simple and subtle and professional. So the next question, who would you consider your main competitor? And this is huge if they have a really big competitor. It's great to kind of study the competitor's logo. Is it working for them? Why? Why not? So it's really nice to be able to kind of look at that and know who they're competing against and maybe how they can design a logo that'll look different from them enough where it kind of makes them a little more unique. This question naturally leads to the next question, which is what is your unique selling point, a USP? So a unique selling point is something that you offer that your competitor does not offer, or you might not even have a competitor because you have a brand new product or service. This is something we definitely need to know because we can echo that throughout the logo design in some form or fashion. Are there any particular colors or combination of colors that they want to avoid? So this question helps you discover, hey, we don't want to use olive green, we don't want to use our competitors' colors. This will help you when it comes to that last stage when we start to develop the color palette for the logo. It'll help us kind of fine tune and get right to the colors we need to pick. If we already know some we need to avoid, it just helps us reduce the timeline of that. The next question prompts them to talk about if there's any logo types or styles they want to avoid. So they may have something in mind, and this is going to be up to them. Some clients really go in a lot of detail about what they don't like, and some they don't answer the question, but it's worth trying to get that information out of them. Are there examples you can provide or logos or logo marks you think might match the expectations or be a good fit or style-wise for your company? This is probably the most beneficial question, and I hope they answer it well for you. I would not really require, but strongly recommend that they send you at least 2 or 3 examples of logo styles they like, because that's going to really help you feel like you're not picking out of thin air the style to give them, that they're giving you a little bit of a head start there. The next one's a little bit more formal. I just really need to know that full company name so we know if we need to put Inc. or .com or any other kind of little thing that you may miss if you're just doing it off of the company name that you know of. There could be these little details that they need to provide. Also, if there's going to be a byline that they want to work into the logo, and any other information. Also, if they have a registered trademark or a TM symbol, that's incredibly critical to know if you need to work that in somewhere in the logo mark. The last question is open-ended, and it's asking them what their expectations are for the logo design process and the outcome, and what their goals are by working through the process together. This will definitely be open-ended. Hopefully you'll have the client fill out this question. Not always, but it's also very helpful to know their expectations, so when you go through this process, those expectations are easily met or set ahead of time. So also the next one is kind of setting a date, letting them know how long this brainstorming process usually takes. After you do a couple logo design processes, you'll be able to find out what your time frame is. I usually like to do about a 2-week time frame, not so short that they don't think I'm working hard, but not so long that they're just sitting there waiting for this to be done. So just kind of work that out. If they need it sooner than that, this is something you work out with the client, but you could set that expectation here right at the end of this document, letting them know what is the next step of the process, and that's going to be sending their first round of concepts, which we're going to be doing here in the next couple lessons. We're going to be working and brainstorming through those first concepts to send. Welcome back to Adobe Illustrator. We are ready to take our concepts that we sketched here and really expand on that and really kind of get some finalized logos here for the client. And there's a great chance that the logo concepts that you're going to see here that we sketched out, these really rough looking concepts, are going to look nothing like, the end logo is going to look nothing like them. We're really going to challenge kind of our iterations and challenge our concepts and really make it come to life. So speaking of which, when we're in here and you want to bring in, either you take a photo of your hand sketch with pen and paper, or you have your digital Procreate app and you export it as a JPEG. However you bring it in, all you have to do is kind of bring it in as a rough kind of JPEG or screenshot. And there's this really neat tool called Image Trace. And how you do image trace is you're going to go ahead and highlight your photo. I just brought this in as a JPEG. I actually took a screenshot of it in my Procreate app. I didn't even export as a JPEG. And you go up to Object, and you're going to go down to Image Trace, and you're going to Make. So it's kind of similar to a clipping mask where you kind of make as the kind of that language. So Image Trace, Make, and it's going to trace everything it sees and make it a vectorized item, which if you were a graphic designer a couple of years ago, before they came out with Image Trace, everybody had to hand trace with the pen tool all these custom illustrations, and they lose this kind of custom brushwork that you did. And this is great for custom typography. If you really like to hand draw this amazing typography and you want it to keep that really hand raw sketched look and feel, this is a great way to do it, to bring that in and do an image trace, because all logos, they can't remain on pen and paper. They need to be vectorized. You need to always have a vector version of your logo. So if you still want to have that custom raw sketch look, it's really hard to emulate that with the pen tool, but you can go do the object and go to image trace, and it's an amazing tool. So now that we've done image trace on this image, you'll see that I can't have access to all the little anchor points to be able to manipulate this a little bit further. So I just need to do one more step, and that's go to Object, and you want to expand. So this is going to expand it, and you're going to do Object and Fill, which is default, and then click OK. And here we are. There's our little vectorized version. We can ungroup it, and now we have access to, you might have to right click and ungroup a few times. And there we go. We have all of our anchor points here that we can manipulate. We can do with the pen tool, we can manipulate, or we can do it with the curvature tool to customize it. So we're not going to do this. This was just a quick little sketch. Doesn't look amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. But just wanted to show you the amazing image trace feature so that you can be able to bring in that kind of custom look when you need to. So here we are with the first sketch. Let's try to kind of come up with our own version. We're not going to keep that because that's so rough. You know, I really am not a custom illustrator. Definitely much better with vector and Illustrator tools. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm kind of seeing this idea, and it's going to evolve a little bit with a coffee cup. So let's go ahead and start creating a little coffee cup outline. This is a top-down view of a coffee cup, so we may need to have a little bit of shadow so it doesn't look like just a circle, kind of add a little bit of detail to it. So I'm just getting the ellipse tool, and I'm just going to draw a simple circle. And let's go ahead and make this a stroke if we can, and make it a little bit thicker. And so what I want to do is I want to have that top-down look. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste, make this a little bit smaller, and see if I can't get the rim of the coffee cup. I want a nice thick coffee cup rim, just like that. And we're not going to be exploring color yet, so everything's going to be kind of black and white, and I like to make it a little bit of a darker gray to kind of emulate color a little bit better. And so now we need to do our little handle that comes out the side. So let's do that. We can go ahead and we could do the rectangle tool. That might be the easiest way to do it. Little handle coming out here. And then we can also just customize these. If you double click them, you can edit just one angle. And that just gives it a nice round appearance. And we can bring this in and then get that curvature tool and match the curve. Okay, so now we need to add kind of a sense of shadow. Let me just make sure my curve is matched. Okay, so now we need to add a sense of shadow because right now it just looks like circles with something coming out the left. We really want to add some dimension to this, and we could do that with a simple shade of black. So we're just going to draw a square here. Just to have the pen tool, and I'm just kind of creating a shape. And I'm going to take that curvature tool. I'm going to use the curvature tool a lot, kind of match that curve of the glass so you can kind of see how it looks like a shadow kind of being cast. And it doesn't have to be quite as long. We can make that a tighter shadow if we need to, and that looks great. So there's kind of our rough coffee mug shape. We can go ahead and put our C in there. I want to find a nice C, a typeface that's a geometric style typeface. So geometric style typefaces really adapt well to circles. You can kind of tell in the Google logo how the G fits really good in a circle because it's a geometric typeface like a Futura. So let me find a geometric typeface that's also thick. We can customize the type. We can hand draw it with a pen tool. But I like to start out with a typeface because it just makes it a lot easier to get the natural shape of the letter. So I'm just going to go over here to my, go ahead and find a good font that would work really well that's geometric. Azo Sans happens to kind of have a little bit of a geometric shape to it. You can kind of see how it curves along a circle a little bit better than other types may not. So let me just show you an example. Let's do one that I know is not a geometric shape. So Helvetica is not geometric. As you can see, it doesn't fit in the circle quite as well. It's got kind of some different gaps there. So we're going to use Azo Sans Black, and we're going to have to use the pen tool to adjust the G a little bit. So we're going to right click. We need to create outline so we can go ahead and edit our anchor points. And let's go ahead and take the pen tool and go ahead and match the gray. So now what I want to do is I want to hug this G in there, and actually I think we have a C. And I think my goal is, instead of having the Coffee Guild just have the C, I really want to work in the C and the G, because I feel like leaving out the G, it just feels empty with just the C. So I'd love to kind of incorporate a G maybe inside, just kind of thinking about this. So let's go ahead and copy and paste. We can see what can happen if we put the G inside. I put the C outside. Since it's Coffee Guild, coffee is going to be the first letter. So we're definitely going to have to customize this a little bit to make it work. So you can see this is not quite fitting exactly how I'd like. I'd like it a lot thinner of a stroke. So what you could do is there's a few things you could do. You could do object, path, you could do an offset path, and you could do a negative offset path. So it makes it a little bit skinnier. So let's try that, maybe not quite as skinny. And they can always ungroup it and move the other original to the side. And then now you have kind of your skinnier version already. You can go in and you can edit this to make sure it goes around the circle a little bit more precisely by using the direct selection tool or the curvature tool to kind of move it and shift it so that it matches kind of the angle. So all we're doing is we're just kind of matching the angle of the circle of the cup, of the rim of the cup. We're just using the direct selection tool and making some movements. Remember, you can always, if you're doing curves, don't ignore the curvature tool. It could be very helpful, kind of fine-tuning curves, especially if you want them to be exact. So there's kind of our C. We could probably make sure this width right here is matched. If you want to be really mathematically precise, we could probably create our own C. And you could do that by doing circles. So we can do a circle, and then another circle, make it a different color, and kind of create our C that way. and just go to my align panel. I'm doing all the center aligns so that I know this is perfectly center aligned. We could take that shape builder tool. We could punch this out. We can also draw a shape halfway down. Okay, and now we have we're selecting all three of those. Getting our shape builder tool, we're going to punch all this out. So just punching all that out. And then we're left with a perfect C. And let's say I don't like the thickness of that. That's where the path, the offset path tool really works well. If we want to do a positive 0.02, we can thicken it up a little bit. No problem, just like that. So that could be the way we do it. It's a little bit more mathematical because it's using a circle. Or you can do the method I have and then kind of shorten the C a little bit by using the shape builder tool and just punching all that out. So either way works. You know, this is a little bit thicker, but we can also make this thicker by using the offset path tool. So now let's try to work in our G. So the G is where we're going to really need some help here, kind of doing what we did prior. So we're going to see if we can tuck that in the center here, just trying out this concept, seeing if that works at all. We can zoom in and you can see it doesn't match perfectly into the circle, but it's pretty darn close. And I like to add a little bit of distance between the characters because when you have a logo and you zoom out, you want to make sure there's enough gap there to really make out the spacing, because I see a lot of mistakes in logo design and they'll have like really thin lines between elements, and when you zoom out it really loses the spacing as you zoom out. So I like to have nice thick lines. I also like to have nice thick spacing between elements to make it really clear when the logo is seen small. So just like a little logo design tip there. So I'm going to create outlines on this because I want to be able to match the curves a little bit on this. So I'm going to take the curvature tool and I'm just kind of matching all of this and kind of bringing that down a little bit so it has more of a circular bend to its curves. And this is where we can soften the type a little bit. So if we want to have rounded corners, you just get the direct selection tool. You're going to go ahead and drag this down. It's going to change all of them at one time. Just going to do a subtle curve to soften the type so it doesn't look so sharp. And we could do the same thing to the C. And we can soften those curves there. Let's go ahead and zoom out and kind of see how this concept is going. Here's our coffee cup coming to life. I like the idea of the C and the G put together. What I want to do is have some more contrast between the C and the G so they don't run together as one symbol. They're read as separate letters. So we could just we're not doing color as much at this point in the stage. I like to kind of keep it black and white. We're working on the concept first, not necessarily the color. And then we're just going to lighten that up a little bit, just kind of give a little bit more contrast. And another thing, when you kind of zoom out and you're kind of looking at your logo and going, is this going to work? I'm zooming out and I'm going, you know, there's a lot of lines and there's a lot of strokes happening. Let's find ways to simplify this logo mark even further to make it more simple shapes. So one thing we can do is make this a solid kind of circle instead of two lines. Instead of an outline or a stroke, we can make this a solid mug kind of rim. So we could do that easily. We have kind of our two shapes here. We could just make these both a fill. Let me make this a different color so you can kind of see what's going on. So all I did is made those two circles fills, and I'm just going to take the shape builder tool and just hold down Option and punch that out. And voila, we already have a filled in shape. We want to make this a fill, so we're going to flip that to fill, and then we're going to make this a little bit of a lighter color. Perhaps we could make this that color. Of course, that's a shadow, so we may need to reverse that out and make this a lighter of a gray, and still make that a shadow. And maybe not make it cast as much, as we're kind of playing around how big is the handle actually going to be. Another thing we can do is to make it more obvious that it's a handle is maybe rotate it a little bit, give it a little bit of an angle, and have it be a little bit down on the coffee cup so it looks kind of like a little angle, like it's hanging out on a coffee table. I'm just going to bring that to the back. Great. So there's our little coffee. Let me make it a little bit thicker. Just doing little small adjustments to everything. So I think that looks really good. It puts more emphasis on the lettering and a little less emphasis on the coffee cup, which I think we really need if we're going to do an abbreviation type logo. It's kind of nice to have more accentuation on the type. So one thing to really make sure people see this as a coffee cup and not just a circle with a strange shape coming out of the end is adding a little bit more dimension. So what I thought we would do is add a little bit of shadow that's cast on the rim onto the cup of coffee. Because eventually I'm just trying to kind of think about color a little bit. I thought about making the center a nice coffee medium brown color. So it'd be nice to have a little bit of a shadow that goes around the rim that's cast so you can see the difference of where the rim is and where the inside coffee is. Just a little shadowing. So I'm going to just go ahead and get an ellipse tool. Just going to draw a circle. I'm going to make it a stroke, and let's make it a different color so we can see what we're doing. Okay, we can add a little bit of coloring here. Let's add a color we're already using. So let's add, just to reduce the overall color count, let's go ahead and use the eyedropper tool and take that color of shade. And I think that's the same shading that's cast here on the handle. Let's make it a little bit thicker. We're just adding a little shadow for the rim that's cast down into the glass. So we could do that, and if we're not happy with kind of how it looks kind of perfectly even, we kind of have an angle, we kind of have a top-down view, but maybe the angle is a little bit over to one side. It's not a totally top-down angle. We can kind of change that a little bit by using the width tool. So we're going to grab the width tool. We're just going to make one side a little bit thicker than the other, which will kind of give it a little bit more dimension. It's not going to be perfectly even. So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag, and see how it just makes it a little bit thicker on one side. Okay, so you see it's a very kind of small change I made, but it gives it a little bit more dimension. It looks like the angle is just 1 or 2 degrees over from top down, kind of gives it a more natural appearance. And plus it gives us a chance to have another little border here to differentiate from the coffee that's going to be inside the cup. And let's say at any time I'm like, I really want to make that mug thicker. Some people would add a stroke of the same color and outline the stroke, or you could just go up to path, offset path, and add a little bit more to it, just like that. And I just automatically thickened it without having to mess around with a lot of stuff. Right, so now I'm just going to mess with spacing a little bit and just kind of make sure there's enough spacing between elements. And we can even check on our grid. We're going to be using grids a lot in the rest of the class, and making sure there's the same distance between the C and the G and then the C and the outside of the cup, just to have consistency with spacing and to kind of have a uniform look with that. And we could do that on the grid. We can also do that by eye, by just kind of drawing a rectangle here and just kind of seeing the spacing here and making adjustments. This is not a scientific way of doing it, but it kind of helps with nudging it over just a little bit to make sure that that spacing is matched. And so we can always pop in the grid at any time to do that, but we're going to do that after we're kind of done with concept time, because we don't need to be perfect right now. The client hasn't even approved some of these yet, so we're just kind of getting the rough idea together so we can send it in for approval. So the way you use contrast in a logo is to accentuate certain items over others, and the shadow is really, now that I'm kind of looking at this and I'm zooming out, I'm seeing those shadows is really drawing way too much attention. So I'm just going to simply take everything that's that shade, and I'm just going to lighten it just a little bit, just to have a little less contrast between the shadow and the mug. So you have a little bit more contrast, or a little bit more focus on the C and the G. So just continuing to find ways to improve the logo in terms of making it as simple as possible, and also making sure colors aren't too harsh, and then that they do have high contrast in areas where you want a lot of attention and focus, which would be the C and the G. So now that we have the C and the G, people need to know what that stands for. So let's go ahead and write our typography out, our coffee guild. I'd like to go back to our concept and have it written just like that around the edge, so we can go ahead and do that. So we're going to use the type on path tool. We're just going to grab our ellipse tool, flip that to a stroke so I can kind of see where the type is going to go. And the type on path tool, if you haven't used it yet, it's a pretty awesome tool. So I'm going to go to type on path, so I'm just going to go down here to my type and then go down to type on path. And I'm going to click right here at the beginning, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in my letters here. I just went and clicked right on the line. So coffee guild, and there is a the, so we don't want to miss out on the coffee guild. And now we need to kind of get an idea on size. I'm not going to mess with the font or the type choice yet, but I'm going to mess with size. So I have a little keyboard shortcut that really helps kind of make it, instead of having to go up here all the time and change the lettering, all you have to do is do Command Shift, and you're going to do your brackets on the bottom left. I'll go ahead and show you a picture of that. You're going to do your left bracket to make it lower and your right to make it bigger. So I'm going to be doing that a lot throughout the class. And now I want to add some spacing, and I also perhaps want to make it all capital letters, because I think with lowercase letters it's not quite as strong. And plus with lowercase letters I hate putting wide spacing. I'm going to show you lowercase letters should never have a lot of wide spacing between them, because they just feel a little bit, I guess, immature in its look, a little less professional, and it doesn't seem as cohesive. So you'll always hear me say don't use a lot of spacing with lowercase typography, but uppercase it's okay, because uppercase are all in the same kind of X height, or they're all the same cap height, I guess I should say, and so they have a lot better, they seem a little bit more together. So I'm just going to go in my character panel and I'm going to make this all caps. So now I have all this all caps, and get an idea and size for that. I can also go ahead and copy and paste this. We need to have our established date somewhere. I think that would be a good counter to have a lot of heavy text up here. We need to have some kind of counter to that so it doesn't seem so top heavy. So putting it along the bottom makes a lot of sense. So we're going to do established. It's 2016. And we don't want to just rotate this and have it be upside down. We want to have it right side up. We always want to do that. So we're just going to go down. This is a little bit tricky, but you can look for that little icon right there. And you're going to click. You're going to click and hold, and it's going to, sometimes it gets a little funny. It's going to go ahead and reverse it on the inside instead of being on the outside. So that gives us a chance to have it be read right side up. So now we're going to make that a lot smaller, and we're not going to have as much wide spacing between that. It doesn't need to stretch as far. So we're just going to do maybe a 50 spacing. And there we go. So what I might do is I might do lowercase for this. So I'm going to go ahead and go to character and just take the all caps off. And what's great about when you do font pairing and you put together different font and typefaces, it's always good to have contrast. So right now I'm going to have this really all caps typography, and then down here could be lowercase, just kind of a way to mix it up a little bit so everything is easily separated and read as separate items. Now the all-important typeface choice. So what typeface or font should we use for this? And so we got to really think about the style of the logo. So this is really kind of a flat style. It's using, there's no drop shadows, there's no gradients. It's a very simple flat design. So we want to stick with maybe kind of a thicker, chunkier typeface to pair well with this kind of thicker kind of elements that we have. So let's think about that as we make our type choice. So this is Helvetica, and let's go ahead and make this a similar gray so we can kind of see it in that final shade. And we could just cycle through several of these to get an idea. I already have kind of one picked out, but I'm going to go over some that could work really well. So we use Azo Sans Black for the G, so it's great to have consistency. Of course, we modified this significantly, so we don't necessarily have to use that same typeface since we modified it. But this works really well. It's got like a nice thick chunky type, and it's really readable when you zoom out. That's why I really like thicker type choices, especially for seals when the type is not as large as it is when it's the main focus point of the logo. So it's nice to have that nice chunky font. So that's a great choice. There's ones that have a little bit more character to them that we can try. This is a slab serif, so it's got kind of these slabs kind of coming off of the type. And so with slab serifs, this can work really well to add a little bit more character to it. And of course, scripts in all caps, it's going to be really hard for that to be read, so that's not going to be a really good choice. When you zoom out, you lose it. You lose kind of that thinner type choice. This could be kind of elegant. It's a little bit thicker. You can always use a bolder weight if you're going to use kind of a serif typeface, but it makes it a little bit more professional and high-end. It kind of, anytime you use a serif, it just looks more high-end. So if that's kind of the look you want to go for, you know, that could, where you got to kind of think about your logo target audience. This is where we think about the client, what's going to resonate. And this is going to be millennials who are going to come and work and use this as a working space. You know, I really want to use a more contemporary sans serif typeface. So that's what I'm kind of thinking about when I'm picking the typeface out. And there is one I picked out ahead of time. There it is. Herb on Black. That's kind of one when I was doing this concept. I did all of these concepts and fleshed them out before I filmed the class to get an idea of kind of the direction I wanted to go in. And this is kind of the typeface I settled on. I spent about a half hour doing exactly what I was doing before, kind of testing out different ones. And this seemed to work really well. It kind of matches a little bit of that geometric kind of look down there in the bottom, and it's got a similar weight. So everything seems consistent, like it kind of goes together. And this is where we can kind of reduce the type size. Of course, you do that shortcut, which is Command Shift, and do your left bracket, and kind of see what spacing looks like here. And this, of course, this bottom one can change. We can match it, make it smaller, or we can have a different typeface altogether. That's okay if you have more than one typeface. Just try not to have more than 3 or 4 in a logo. That definitely is not a good idea. So here's our final one here on the right, just kind of tweaked a little bit of the bends and curves there. So now I can take the one that we just created. I'd like to keep it around. You never know when I might need to use it for another iteration of a logo, so I always like to keep that around. So here's our little espresso shot glass right there. And now we have a couple more to do. We have a espresso machine and a coffee cup. Let's try the coffee cup next. We're going to do that right here. We're just going to be really simple. We're just going to create a circle. We're going to get that curvature tool, and we're going to just bring it all the way down. So you almost have like an instant coffee cup shape. Of course, this does need a little bit of tweaking. You could double click to turn it into a corner. So I'm just going to double click these 2 edges, turn it into a corner, and mess with it that way. Maybe make it a little less thick. Make it more of a bowl kind of shape. We need to have a little handle. So what we can do is we can do a circle as our handle and put a stroke on it. Make the stroke fairly thick. And then we can also change the angle of the, make it a little bit less of a perfect circle, a little bit more of a classic handle that you would see on a coffee cup. If you want to make that thick and make it down here a little bit thinner, give it a more natural curve, you could do that as well. So what I thought after kind of working on this, what would be a really a better icon is kind of your classic mug style instead of the cup. So this is still great. I can just save that for later. And we're going to learn how to create this shape right here. So I'm just going to take the square. Let's go do a square. And I'm going to take the curvature tool. I'm going to go down and make my curves. I'm going to take the direct selection tool and soften everything a little bit. And then I'm going to do the handle just like I did before, and we can even borrow the handle we just did. So we don't have to redo that. And if we can always add a point. So we're adding kind of a curve point to bring that down a little bit. And maybe reducing the thickness. And I love using the width tool to create kind of smoke effects. So I'm just going to do this very small curve, just like a little curve with the pen tool. And then you can always take the width tool. I'm going to zoom in here. I'm just going to make it wide on one side and skinny on the other. And you have a nice, natural, smooth shape. Of course, you can always shrink it down like we have it. And you have kind of your little coffee cup symbol. So that's kind of how I created that particular one. So I'm going to go ahead and get this in here. Kind of worked on that one a little bit longer. And so now we have 3 of our icons, and we'll balance all these icons once we get the last one. The last one's going to be the toughest. It's going to be an espresso machine. So we're definitely going to need to find a reference photo. Unfortunately, I already have a reference photo right here, and I've already kind of drawn a little bit of the basics for that. So we're going to trace this just like we did with the espresso shot. We're going to think about simplifying it as much as we can. So we're not going to trace all the little details, just kind of the big blocks of details, because we really want to make this a very concise, very small detailed, or not small detail, but less details as possible icon. So this is kind of the roughed out blocked shape we're going to go for, and we're going to punch out details using the shape builder tool, some white punched out areas to flesh it out, and then we're going to add our little shot glass. So this is kind of the shape we're looking to build here with this reference photo. And so I'm just going to go ahead and trace using a stroke with the pen tool, just some basic shapes. Doesn't have to be exact. You could take some guesses here with how you want to have it. Just getting the basic shape. So we have some shapes here. Very basic. We can duplicate that shape. And don't worry if shapes cross over, because you're going to blend all this into one big shape. So it doesn't matter if they cross over. Let's reverse that. We're just going to reflect. So now we have that same side done already. Okay, now we're going to do the bottom. Okay, so you can kind of see a rough outline. I'm going to reduce the transparency so you can kind of start to see a little bit more of what we sketched here. So any other details you think are important to make this be seen as an espresso machine, go ahead and draw those. So for right now, we're going to need this portion. It's going to get the curvature tool to make that bend right there. We go ahead and zoom in. We don't want too many details, so let's simplify it. It's our espresso machine now. It doesn't have to be an exact copy of the photo. You can make it whatever espresso machine you want to make it. So now we kind of have these two kind of things that come out here. That's where the espresso comes out. We're just going to make it one, because this is a double espresso machine, which would just make the icon too complex. So let's just do our little shape here that comes out. Just going to do a stroke and make it thick. And then maybe put like a round cap on it. Just kind of showing our little espresso spout, I guess it's called. Going to reflect, just reflecting. Just went to transform, reflect, and the object panel. So this is kind of a very archaic, rough sketch. I kind of see maybe I want to fill that in a little bit, so just drawing a shape there. There we go. So this is our rough outline. We can always add our little espresso cup later on, because we already have one of those made. So we don't need the reference photo anymore, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove that so you can kind of see our basic outlines. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and remove these two because I already have that as a stroke. But I'm going to flip all these to fill, and there's our basic espresso machine shape. And what's great about this is I can maybe put a stroke on this nice shape here. Put a little stroke, make it nice and thick. Bring that to the front. Put some round caps on it. And I can use the shape builder tool. I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of this. And I'm going to need to outline my stroke on that. So I'm going to go path, outlining the stroke, because you have to outline your path strokes to be able to punch things out using the shape builder tool. I'm going to hold down Option. I'm going to punch all of the white portions out. And you notice it's kind of creating that negative space with the icon. Sometimes you have to click and drag all these little intersecting points we made, because we kind of drew it really quick and messy. And there we go. So now we're kind of cutting out some details into the machine. And we could do the same thing down here to kind of create a little bit of a negative space line that goes across. And then we can add our little espresso cup. So we could spend a little bit more time kind of perfecting little imperfections like down here that kind of have a strange curve. So just kind of removing things and just kind of fine-tuning it. We could spend probably even more time messing around with this, but for the sake of time, I think we're ready. I punched out another little line down there in the bottom. So of course this is all transparent, as you can see. So let's kind of join all this as one icon. We could take the shape builder tool, and instead of holding down Option to subtract, we can add everything together as one kind of icon. We might have to do this in stages. So we're adding that together, and then we're kind of adding this together. Okay, and we're adding these together just in stages. Great. So now we have that. We're going to group this together, and I wonder if it's going to give us the opportunity to kind of round the edges. It is. Okay, so this will help kind of round everything like everything else we've been doing, kind of rounding some of the edges. Might also have to do this in stages, so just selecting this middle kind of area. So this adds a little bit more polish to any kind of logo or logo design, unless you want to have those sharp edges. I grouped together our espresso machine and we have it right here. If you still have any paths, just make sure you go up to path and you outline your stroke. So just going to go to object, path, outline stroke, and now I can kind of reduce it in size and I have my kind of final icon. So one thing I want to do is I want to add our little espresso shot in there. So I'm going to copy and paste that. That's already ready to go. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller, kind of put it right there in the middle there. We can also change the colors on this, bring that up a little bit. So we could decide this is the one I did kind of before I filmed the class, is kind of creating the ideas, and this is the one after. We can use whichever one we think, you know, kind of communicates the espresso machine. And since our reference photo had 2 spouts, we just wanted to do one, so that was kind of a mistake on my part. So let's go ahead and use the one I did prior. I did the 1 spout, so I kind of created my own little spout there. And drag that in. And there are our 4 little icons ready to go. Now we're going to need to balance out the symbols. So let's go ahead and slide that over because I might want to use that coffee cup later for another idea. So here we go. So now we need to have some balance. So when we're talking about balance in design, I like to kind of zoom out just a little bit. And we got to make sure there's not one element that overpowers another or one element that's too big. They all kind of need to be equal. So what we could do is we can kind of do circles, kind of get an idea of size. So maybe an icon is not taller than the circle, and they can all kind of be even throughout. Just kind of making sure they all kind of match in there. We could do that method, which is kind of a traditional method. We can pop it on the grid, but we're not going to do the grid quite yet, because I've been saying that a lot. So let's eyeball it here. Sometimes eyeballing is a little bit better because you may have an element that extends outside the circle that would make this smaller than it needs to be. So a lot of times I'll just optically adjust, which is just me kind of seeing how it goes and kind of going, okay, well that's detailed, so let's make that a tiny bit smaller compared to the other ones. And we also want to make sure there's a little bit of a distance, similar distance between all of these spaces here. So maybe tuck that a little bit closer. Push these a little bit further away. I want to have some equal spacing in all 4 of these corners. So now we're ready to work our typography and do our type on path tool. We already have that created on our other one, so we're just going to borrow it. And we have the one that's not outlined. So this is why I keep these things, so I don't have to do the same task over and over. I already have it kind of ready to go. And let me kind of see what typeface might work really well with this one. I think lots of wide spacing is kind of what my original concept had. So let me see what we come up with here.